So let me tell you this first story, okay? Because it's wild. It takes place in an English town called Bradford. And okay, listen, it's October of 1858. So try and imagine that in your brain. The Industrial Revolution is going off and it's really changed everything. Businesses were just popping up everywhere and people were trying to take advantage of the holiday season and make some money, right? So they're just like, yeah, I shine shoes, make a store out of it, just whatever. So on October 30th of 1858, it's like the day before Halloween, people are already celebrating, walking around in like costumes, people are having wild parties and just celebrating, Everyone's probably smelled like shit because there's no such thing as deodorant yet. It was wild. Anyway, a local candy seller, his name was William Hardacker, was looking to offload some of his holiday candy, right? So he sets up shop at a local market and he's selling like a ton of this one striped peppermint flavored candy. It's like something you would get at like a doctor's, not ideal, but it was called humbugs, like bah humbug. They loved them back then because they didn't have taste yet. And William, he was actually known for his humbug candies. And in town, he would like go by the name Humbug Billy. So people would like flock to him for this special treat. William was selling these humbugs at a huge discount because the candy he was selling, it kind of had a weird discoloration to them. So they're like, quote unquote, defective, So he's like, I should just sell them at half price and just kind of get them gone. And they must have tasted fine because he was going to try and like sell this candy no matter what. And of course, people love a sale and they bought a ton of them. By the end of the day, William had sold 5 pounds of the humbug candies. And then the next morning, it was Halloween, right? Woo! The big day is finally here. In the town of Bradford, normally, or they're supposed to be going about their business and celebrating as usual, but this time the town was in a panic. Go on, you say, what? That very night, 2 young boys had died suddenly in their home. What? I know. Even though it wasn't uncommon for children to suddenly die of disease back then, which is super sad, right? But these 2 were different and people were still feeling uneasy about it. So the police, they get involved and they originally thought the kids had died of cholera, which was everywhere at the time. But the boys, who were only 2 and 11, they at the time were perfectly healthy. So it was just super confusing and none of it made sense. The parents of the boys were scrambling for answers, right? They were remembering the day before with the boys, like, what had we done? What happened, And they're thinking, and they realize, oh my God, both of the boys ate that weird colored humbug candy, right? And they're putting it together and they're like, oh my God, they did. So they're thinking, they're like, oh my God, it's gotta be this candy. That's the only thing that makes sense. But they needed to connect the candy to the kid's death because it was just like a thought, So the father and another young man in the house decide to test the candy for poison. But again, this was 1858 and it's not like they're chemists or anything, And the only way they could determine if the candy was poisoned or not was to eat it. Bold. I know. So the father and his buddy popped the candy in their mouths and they're sucking on it, And not long after, both of them were bending over in pain. And they're like, oh my God, right? And then following that, they were struck by this intense diarrhea. Woo! It was shooting out their ass, Wow, they're just glued to that toilet. Well, word got out that these 2 men were sick from this candy. So people they're starting to put it together and they're realizing, oh my God, my kid ate this candy. And another person's like, my kid ate this candy. And next thing you know, tons of people are realizing that their kids and some adults had eaten the candy and many were getting sick. Oh shit. So it turns out that this candy was actually poison. What the hell, humbug, Bill? Was such a betrayal. The candy man is trying to kill us all? Well, with so many cases of candy poisoning popping up all over town, again, the authorities, they got to get involved on like a bigger scale. So they start tracking down the nausea, the pain, and diarrhea symptoms of the survivors. Officers spend the whole next day and night rushing around town, knocking on people's doors, warning them not to eat this candy. And it didn't take long for the police to kind of put two and two together and think poison. Apparently, along with diseases like cholera, poisoning was pretty common at the time. Did you remember aqua tofana? Yeah, it is common, okay? Accidental and intentional poisonings usually happened so often because buying poison at the time was very easy. It was like as common as buying a carton of milk from the store. So you're like, hey, I want to kill my husband today. You just go get that poison. That easy. Now, one of the most common poisons sold at the time was arsenic. Arsenic could be purchased from your local corner store without even a question followed. Like no one was keeping track of who bought it or looked at them sideways if they did buy it. I mean, think about it. If you did that today, you'd end up on a list somewhere, you know? But not back then. I guess people all over Victorian England would use arsenic as rat poison. Oopsie. Arsenic is like a white powdery substance, and it really was the perfect poison if you were trying to kill something or someone. Because arsenic, I guess it has like a slightly sweet, non-toxic taste sprinkled on top of like cereal, something, you know? It got me thinking, it was like, oh, it's kind of like antifreeze. I do a lot of murder mysteries, you guys. So I'm like, yeah, antifreeze, I hear that's sweet too. So if someone wanted to sprinkle a little bit in your food, you honestly probably would not notice. Many people during that time period were known for eating very heavy, rich, sugary foods. So shitting yourself was pretty common, and it was a regular thing. So the symptoms you would have right after eating the poison, to some, were pretty standard for Victorian England, the vomiting and diarrhea. I just love that, right? Vomiting and diarrhea being kind of norm. Just funny. But what I'm getting at is that no one's mind would automatically think arsenic poisoning, you know? Now, on top of all of that, if you poison someone with arsenic, it would be pretty difficult to trace it back to the person who sold it and when it was used. Everything kind of depended on the memory of the arsenic salesperson. Now, all of this is just talking about the intentional arsenic poisonings. But at the time, there were about 1 million normal uses of arsenic that could lead to accidental death. I mean, it was everywhere. It was used in glass making, to clothes dye, to wallpaper, you know. Even doctors found it really useful. They would put small amounts of it in medicinal concoctions because it was said to help stimulate the blood. We can giggle now. They were so silly, weren't they? So during the investigation, the authorities are trying to put like all these pieces together and track down who the hell sold these humbugs. And eventually the trail leads to this man named William and his little candy stall. I mean, his nickname was Humbug Billy. But when authorities went to William's home to have a little talk with them, they found him absolutely sick to his stomach in bed. I guess he himself had a few of the weird colored candies and was paying a hefty price. So the authorities, they knew it was the candies that made people sick, but they didn't believe William was like, you know, an evil child killer. So they decided to find out how the hell these candies were made. And sure as shit, they found their answer because the main culprit was sugar. Oh no. I know. Sugar is outside your window right now waiting for you. If you listened to our episode about sugar, you might remember how expensive it was back in the day. And the Brits, they just loved it. And they were even addicted to it. But the sugar making process was complicated and even expensive. So many candy manufacturers would mix real sugar with cheaper stuff in order to have more of it. They essentially cut the sugar with other powdered material like limestone, I know, plaster of Paris, which I was like, what's that? It sounds so fancy. Or a soft mineral substance named gypsum. Even though to us we're like, you put tile in my sugar? Back then, it wasn't a huge deal. They were like, oh my God, I love limestone. They would even call these half mystery powder mixtures DAF. So when police were doing their investigation, they realized that the candies were produced using DAF, the weird sugar mixture. Humbug Willie had purchased the candies from a wholesale candy seller, and his name was Joseph Neal. A couple of weeks before the sale, Joseph had sent his employee to purchase DAF from his local pharmacist. I know, I guess that's where they would get it. Now, unfortunately, the pharmacist, he was sick that day. So he had to have one of his newer, less experienced employees take over for the day and handle this order. When Neal's employee came in asking for DAF, the apprentice, I guess he got all sorts of confused as to what was in what bin. He's like, I know DAF is white powdery and yeah, I know that. So he knew he had to get him a white powdery substance. I mean, that's DAF, right? So he measured out 12 pounds of white powder from an unlabeled bin nearby and handed it over to the employee for the humbugs. But the pharmacist, he didn't realize that he had just given this person 12 pounds of pure arsenic. Whoopsie. It kind of reminded me when you are going for a job interview and you lie and you say you know how to use Excel, but really you don't. And then you show up for the job and you're like, yeah, I totally know what I'm doing. And you just start guessing. It's like that, but not like that because this obviously killed people. I'm sure he couldn't use this job as a reference, is what I'm saying. So this guy, he gets that DAF, right? Well, he thinks it's DAF, but it's really arsenic. And that was then added to the candy mixture by William. And when they came out that weird color, William, he honestly didn't think much about it, It's just kind of it happens from time to time. And that's why he felt confident in selling them at a discount and even treating himself to a few. So by this point, authorities, they were trying to get the word out all over Bradford. They went door to door and posted written warnings in public locations saying these candies are poison, don't eat them. I mean, they tried their best. But in the end, a total of 20 people died from eating the poisoned humbugs. 20! Sadly, 13 of them were children and 7 were adults. The youngest victim was only 17 months old. Around 200 other people got seriously ill. And when a professional inspected the candy, they found out that each humbug contained more than enough arsenic to kill a grown man. Oh shit, So, the 200 people who got seriously sick from the candy but survived were considered very lucky. The authorities quickly pointed the finger at the new pharmacy employee who fucked up, I mean, the guy had only been working for 3 weeks, so whoopsie, but his careless mistake was what led to the deaths of 20 people. So the authorities, they end up arresting this guy, the pharmacist, as well as Peter Neal, the candy maker, for the crimes. Now, listen, this trial was highly publicized, and the whole debacle became known as the Bradford Sweets poisoning of 1858. The prosecution was not able to show that a law was broken by any of these men. Yes, it was an unfortunate and preventable accident, but it was not done with any intentions to harm any of the poor people who died. I mean, we're all thinking it, I hope. This all could have been prevented with a label. Maybe taking a marker and wrote on the bin hey, poison, But nobody comes to me for these answers. So this meant that nobody was ever held accountable for the poisoned humbugs, which kind of had me confused because I don't know. I want to hear what you guys think. If they should have been charged, should they be accountable for an accident, but an accident that killed 20 people? Right? I don't know. But there was a silver lining. 10 years after the poisoning, a law called the Pharmacy Act of 1868 was passed. And this required that poisons be stored and sold in specific bottles made of colored glass so that shop workers and customers would be sure they knew what they were getting, Now, some poisons also required specific labels. Oh, finally, what an idea. And now, when people purchased poison, the shop workers also had to take note in case of any type of poisoning. I mean, people were still able to purchase their arsenic and use it, but at least this new law would help to avoid little accidents from happening again. So even though no one served jail time for the 20 deaths that occurred in Bradford, this tragedy did help to make it more difficult to accidentally poison a bunch of children on Halloween for decades to come. So it's a little bit of a win. I'd say a big win because they started labeling shit. Like, what an idea. But candy isn't just dangerous when it's potentially poisoned. It turns out it can be a lethal force of nature. Let me tell you, this next story, when I heard about it, I was like, excuse me? Huh? What? This is not on my bingo card. And also, it created a new fear in me. It left me with an irrational fear of molasses.